Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. So, since like, I don't know, 2013 or something, I've been farming on 30-inch beds. That's pretty much exclusively what I used, though over the course of the last few years, before we moved to this new property, I started to trial some 36-inch beds and some 48-inch beds. And now, on the new property, we went entirely to 48 inches. So what I want to try and do today is answer the question, are wider beds actually better? So let's do it.
Now that you got me started, I just can't stop. No.
First things first, if you're not subscribed to this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, you already did that, you're awesome. Second thing second, is that a phrase? My book is basically out. It comes out on the 20th. By the time you watch this video, if you order it right now, it will basically be on its way. I recommend getting it from no-tillgrowers.com because that money goes into our creative budget so we can make more videos and more podcasts and all the things. At the end of this video, I'll kind of just do a brief rundown of this book for anyone interested. So if you don't care about this video, you can just skip there, but otherwise I'm going to put that at the end of the video. All right, let's talk wider beds. One note, there will be some math in here and it'll be American math. So sorry to my metric people, I will try and fill that in a little bit in some titles down here. Also, I'm legendary for my math skills on this channel. So correct me where I'm wrong in the comments. And also, I did try and write it down this week in crayon, which makes it legit. So first of all, why are 30-inch beds popular to begin with? And the answer is that a lot of the tools in market gardening are designed around 30 inches. The bed rigs are 30 inches. A lot of the BCS implements are 30 inches. A lot of the precision cultivation tools are 30 inches. It's been popularized by people like Jean-Martin Fortier and Elliot Coleman. It is a viable way of farming. We loved our 30-inch beds. We didn't have a huge problem with them. They're great for straddling. They're easy to plant into, easy to harvest from. They're easy to, just get over when you're trying to get across your garden. 48-inch beds have some difficulties with that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But for us, why we transitioned was largely math. So we're on a new farm, and we're going to, over the next few years, try and fully maximize this whole space. There is going to be roughly an acre open, and we want to really use every bit of that acre. And we also want to limit the amount of time we're spending on pathway management. So we did two things. We actually increased the width of our pathways from 14 inches to 18 inches, and we increased the bed width from 30 inches to 48 inches. So we added 18 inches to the bed and 4 inches to the pathway. But when you look at a plot, that adds a significant amount of growing space. Let me kind of explain, and the math is going to be kind of annoying here for a second, but I promise it'll make sense. So if you had a 100-foot plot by 50-foot plot, and you wanted to turn that into a garden, if you were to use our old standard method with the 14-inch pathways and 30-inch beds, you would get 27 beds in that plot. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot of beds, but hold on a second. If you were to do our new setup, which is 4 foot with 18-inch pathways, so slightly larger pathways, 18 more inches in the bed, that gives you 18 beds in that same plot. It's fewer beds, but the square footage, the square growing space, you gain 225 square feet of growing space. That's a lot of growing space. That's a 225 extra lettuces or whatever, which is, at $3 a pop, quite a lot of money. And that's every single season or every single crop that you're getting out of there. So the paths are a bit wider, but there's fewer of them and there's less space to take care of. And I should also say that we chose 18 instead of 14 for the pathways because, like you can see, most of our pathways are living pathways. So I needed a mower. I couldn't find many 14-inch mowers. I honestly couldn't find that many 18-inch mowers, but I kind of standardized the pathway to fit the mower. So there you are. And I'm not going to talk about living pathways here. That's all in this video here. You should watch it. Yep. Read the comments too, there's lots of info in there. How do all those things come up about like the tools, for instance? Like we don't have the same standardized tools. Well, the reality was we started to realize we weren't really using the tools very much. We don't need as much precision cultivation. We don't have as many weeds because of our no-till system. So we weren't needing to do precision cultivations all the time. We weren't running the BCS on the beds very much. Like we weren't using the power harrow anymore or anything like that. So the standard of the bed width didn't matter as much to us. Things like harvesting, the greens harvester is something like 15 inches, so we just have to we just have to do another swipe or two. So it does add a little bit. The tools don't totally match up on 48 inches, but for the most part, it's totally workable, and that hasn't been the biggest issue for us. I will, however, admit in terms of tools, the transition was kind of ridiculous because all of our row covers and our shade cloth and all of the things we bought them for 30-inch beds and not 48-inch beds. All of our hoops, all of that stuff. So that has been a little bit of a waste, but over time we'll slowly get back to owning the equipment that makes more sense for 48-inch beds. I also want to give more context to what the advantages of having a bigger bed are, because it's not easier to walk over it. I mean, I literally have to leap over it, which always just looks ridiculous. But in order to kind of minimize the leaping, we've shrank the beds. We used to be at 100 feet long. Now we're at 50 feet. All of our beds are 50 feet long instead of 100 feet long. So you can walk around them a little bit easier. And sometimes if you have to leap, you have to leap. But some advantages, some of the reasons that I'm willing to put up with some of that is some space efficiency gains. So like in a situation like sweet potatoes, you can see our sweet potato patch behind us. Hi, kitty cat. Where on 30-inch beds, we'd put one row and they'd be essentially 4 feet apart, which is wider than you need them for sweet potatoes. Here, we can put 2 rows on a bed, and they're essentially like 30 inches apart. And that means that we can get the same amount of sweet potatoes in not quite half the space, so like 3/4 of the space, roughly. That's the idea. So yeah, that's one spatial gain, is where stuff that I used to put on 1 row, like okra or like sweet potatoes, I can put 2 rows. Things that I used to put 2 rows, I can often put 4, so that would be like kale or Swiss chard. I can fit them comfortably in 4 rows. And sometimes the spatial gain is just literally space. So whereas we used to plant our lettuces at like 7.5 inches, now we can plant them at 8 and give them just a little bit more room, which I think, and I'm still kind of working on this, has improved our yields a little bit. I have to do this for at least a whole season to know that for certain. So that's a spatial gain, but it also gives me room if I want to transplant some green onions or something in between those lettuces. I have a little bit more room to do that than I did on 30 inches when I was planting them at 7.5 or whatever it was. So that extra 1/2 inch across the bed is really important. Generally speaking, you should at least get some amount of space efficiency gain. Some, for every whatever X inches that you're adding, it needs to be adding that much more crop to your bed. So if you're adding 50% more, you need to be getting at least 50% more crop. If you're not, then there's not as much advantage because you're spending more money on, management, labor, and materials, but you're not getting more crop out of it, then that doesn't really make any sense. One of the things that we've also been doing is, instead of using it like a 48-inch bed, we've actually been using it like 2 24-inch beds. I talked about this in the farm tour video I did back, that is right here, that you can click on if you're on YouTube. But basically, I have 2 24-inch beds, and this keeps it super diverse, and I can flip back and forth between these. I could do that on 30 inches, but it was only 2 rows. Now it's like 3 rows on each side, and then I can flip those back and forth. So lettuce here beats there, next it could be lettuce there, beats here, it could be green onions, carrots, green onions, and you flip those back and forth. That's our general crop rotation. It just makes it easier for me to do it that way. But that's not the only, interplanting advantage. Like I said, if you spread your lettuce out a little bit more, maybe you can put green onions or something in the middle of those. Things like the tomato beds, you can see that I've planted multiple crops on the side of those. So whereas on 30 inches, once you get your tomatoes, they really take over the entire bed. But if you have those extra 9 inches on either side of the bed, that's an extra 9 inches that you can plant into. So that's kind of what we're playing with a little bit more, because if we can get multiple crops in the bed through the season, on an interplant like tomatoes, we can really boost the profitability of that space. So the answer to our wider beds better is maybe. I'm not going to suggest just going out and plowing up your garden and reshaping your beds, but if you're on super small acreage, it may be worth considering having wider beds and not going with that standard 30-inch bed system, because it just is a better use of space. I should also say that I think 48 inches is probably my limit. I'm not going to go to 60. It's just too much to get over. Sometimes I do want to get across them, so I don't want to hurt myself. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to correct my math, which I know was flawless. Like this video if you like this video, and stay tuned for a little rundown of the book. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.
'Cause that man is trouble, you best beware.
Hey, thank you for sticking around. Let me talk real quick about the book I wrote and the book that just got released. It's out July 20th, 2021. It'd be awesome if you pick this up from no-tillgrowers.com, like I said in the beginning of this video, because the proceeds go to making more content like this, which was obviously awesome and full of math. So, here we go. So I designed the whole book around these 3 principles of conservation agriculture, which are disturb the soil as little as possible, keep it covered as much as possible, and keep it planted as much as possible. And so we do a bunch of different stuff in this book. I go into the basic science of living soil and talk about photosynthesis and how to manage photosynthesis on a production scale and what that means for the farmer. And my wife did the illustrations. She's incredible. Big shout out to Hannah Crabtree for that. I talk about compost in the no-till garden, which is a huge question mark. How do you manage it? What the different types of compost are? And then I talk about mulches, the different types of mulches. What are some considerations for those? What are some important things to keep in mind? Which I think is the same thing as considerations, but I talk about bed turnovers. I talk about interplanting. I do a huge amount of work on interplanting. It's like my favorite part of the book because interplanting is kind of my thing. I do a lot on cover crops. I do a lot on cover crop termination. I discuss fertility management, and then at the end, I actually get into 7 different crops, which are, I don't know if I can do this, carrots, lettuce, arugula, sweet potatoes, cherry tomatoes, garlic, and beets, unless I said beets twice, in which case beets is in there once. I hope you will pick up a copy. I worked really ridiculously hard on it at like 2:30 a.m. some mornings, and like in between farming. It was ridiculous. So I hope you will support it, but I also hope you'll support it because it supports our work at no-tillgrowers.com if you buy it from no-tillgrowers.com specifically. So if you can't afford it, if you can't afford the shipping, there's also digital copies too. You can't get those from us. You got to get those from digital people, digital copy sellers. Otherwise, thanks you all. We really appreciate the support, and you rock. We'll see you later.
And though deep down I know I might be headed for teardrops. Now that you got me started, I just can't